The warm afternoon sun filtered through the oak trees as Lieutenant Ashley Rodriguez carefully backed out of her grandmother's driveway. The smell of fresh-baked cookies still lingered in her car, mixed with the vanilla scent of the birthday cake sitting safely in a box on her passenger seat. At 28, Ashley had seen enough of the world to appreciate these quiet moments with family. Her grandmother, Rosa, had insisted on packing extra cookies for Ashley to take back to her apartment. "You're too skinny, Mija," the elderly woman had said, just like she always did. Ashley smiled at the memory as she adjusted her rearview mirror. The military had taught her to be aware of her surroundings at all times, a habit that had served her well during 2 tours in Afghanistan. The suburban neighborhood was peaceful on this Thursday evening. Kids rode their bikes on sidewalks while parents watered their lawns. Ashley drove her silver Honda Accord slowly, careful not to disturb the tranquil scene. She had worked hard to afford this car, saving every penny from her military salary. It wasn't flashy, but it was reliable and clean. 3 blocks away, Officer Rick Thompson sat in his patrol car, finishing up paperwork from his last call. At 42, he was a 15-year veteran of the police force. His record wasn't perfect. There had been complaints over the years, mostly from people in certain neighborhoods. Thompson always defended his actions, claiming he was just doing his job in tough situations. Thompson looked up from his paperwork as a silver Honda caught his attention. The car was moving slowly through the neighborhood, and something about it bothered him. Maybe it was too nice for someone who looked like they didn't belong in this area. Maybe it was just his instincts telling him to pay attention. He started his engine and pulled onto the street behind the Honda. Ashley noticed the police car in her mirror immediately. Her military training had taught her to be observant, and she could feel the officer's eyes on her car. She checked her speedometer, making sure she was driving exactly at the speed limit. Her hands remained steady on the wheel as she approached the next traffic light. Thompson ran the license plate through his system while following behind. The car came back clean, registered to an Ashley Rodriguez with no outstanding warrants or violations. But Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He had been patrolling this neighborhood for years, and he knew who belonged here and who didn't. The traffic light ahead turned yellow, and Ashley came to a smooth stop. She glanced in her rearview mirror again and saw the police car stopping directly behind her. Her heart rate increased slightly, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had done nothing wrong. Her registration was current, her insurance was paid, and she hadn't broken any traffic laws. Thompson studied the driver in front of him. From his position, he could see that it was a young woman with dark hair. The car was expensive looking, probably worth more than most people in this area could afford. He made a decision and reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I'm conducting a traffic stop on a silver Honda Accord. License plate," Thompson called in the stop, giving Ashley's plate number to the dispatcher. Ashley heard the brief sound of a police siren and saw the flashing lights activate behind her. Her stomach dropped, but she maintained her composure. She had been pulled over once before, years ago, for a broken taillight. That officer had been professional and courteous. She hoped this would be the same. Pulling carefully to the side of the quiet residential street, Ashley put her car in park and turned off the engine. She placed both hands on the steering wheel, exactly where the officer could see them. This was something her father had taught her when she first learned to drive. "Always keep your hands visible," he had said. "Make sure the officer knows you're not a threat." Thompson approached the car slowly, his right hand resting near his service weapon. This was standard procedure, he told himself, though something about this particular stop felt different. The driver sat perfectly still, hands visible on the wheel. Most people fidgeted when they got pulled over, but this person showed unusual composure. Ashley watched in her side mirror as the officer approached. He was a white man, middle-aged with a stern expression. She took a deep breath and prepared to be polite and cooperative. In her experience, most problems could be solved with respectful communication. Thompson reached the driver's side window and tapped on the glass with his knuckle. Ashley pressed the button to roll down her window, moving slowly and deliberately. She kept her hands visible at all times. "Good evening, officer," Ashley said in a calm, clear voice. "Is there a problem?" Thompson studied her face carefully. She was young, probably in her 20s, with intelligent eyes and a confident bearing. Something about her attitude rubbed him the wrong way. Most people were nervous when he pulled them over, but this woman seemed too calm, too controlled. "License and registration," Thompson said without answering her question. "Of course," Ashley replied. "My license is in my purse on the floor, and my registration is in the glove compartment. Is it okay if I reach for them?" Thompson was surprised by the question. Most people just reached for their documents without asking permission. This woman's behavior was unusual, almost like she had been trained to interact with police officers. "Go ahead," Thompson said, his eyes watching her every movement. Ashley reached slowly for her purse, keeping her movements smooth and predictable. She pulled out her wallet and removed her driver's license, then reached across to the glove compartment for her registration and insurance papers. She handed all the documents to Thompson through the window. Thompson examined the documents carefully. Everything appeared to be in order. The license photo matched the woman in front of him, and the registration was current. But he still couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about this situation. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Thompson asked, his tone becoming more aggressive. Ashley was taken aback by the question. She had every right to drive through any public street she wanted, but she didn't want to escalate the situation by pointing that out. "I was visiting my grandmother," she said simply. "She lives about 3 blocks back. I'm heading home now." Thompson looked at the address on her license. It was from a different part of town, not too far away, but definitely not in this upscale neighborhood. He handed her documents back to her. "Step out of the car," Thompson ordered. Ashley felt a chill run down her spine. This was not standard procedure for a simple traffic stop, especially when she hadn't been speeding or committing any violations. She had been pulled over for what seemed like no reason at all, and now the officer wanted her out of the vehicle. "May I ask why?" Ashley said, trying to keep her voice respectful. Thompson's expression hardened. He didn't like being questioned, especially by someone who he felt was being disrespectful to his authority. "I said step out of the car," Thompson repeated, his hand moving closer to his service weapon. Ashley's military training kicked in. She recognized the signs of escalation and knew that the situation was becoming dangerous. She had learned to read body language and voice tones during her time in the Army, and everything about this officer's demeanor suggested that he was looking for a confrontation. Despite her growing concern, Ashley complied with the order. She opened her car door slowly and stepped out onto the sidewalk. She kept her hands visible at all times and made no sudden movements. "Turn around and put your hands on the car," Thompson commanded. Ashley's heart was racing now, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had done nothing wrong, but she knew that arguing with an aggressive police officer could make the situation much worse. She turned around and placed her hands flat against the roof of her car. By this time, other residents in the neighborhood had begun to notice the police stop. A few people came out of their houses to see what was happening. Some watched from their windows while others stood in their driveways. Thompson called for backup on his radio. Within minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived on the scene. Officers stepped out and approached the situation, though none of them asked what was happening or why Ashley had been stopped. Ashley remained perfectly still against her car, her military training helping her stay composed under pressure. She had been in much more dangerous situations during her deployments overseas, but something about this felt different. In combat, she had known who the enemy was. Here she was supposed to be safe in her own country, protected by the same law enforcement officers who were now treating her like a criminal. The backup officers formed a loose circle around Ashley and her car. Their presence made the situation feel even more tense and dangerous. Ashley could hear people in the neighborhood talking in worried voices, wondering what was happening. "What did she do?" one neighbor called out. Thompson ignored the question and continued his inspection of Ashley's car, looking through the windows as if searching for something incriminating. He found nothing unusual, just the birthday cake she had gotten for her grandmother and some personal items. Ashley remained silent and cooperative, even as her mind raced with questions about why this was happening to her. She had been taught to respect law enforcement, and she had never had any negative interactions with police before. This experience was opening her eyes to a reality that many people faced. The evening air grew thick with tension as more neighbors gathered to watch the unfolding scene. Ashley remained motionless against her car, her hands flat against the cool metal roof. She could feel the eyes of multiple officers on her, studying her every breath and movement. Her military training had prepared her for hostile environments, but This felt surreal. She was in her own country in a peaceful neighborhood, yet being treated like an enemy combatant. Officer Thompson circled around to face Ashley directly. His face was flushed with frustration and his jaw was clenched tight. He had been hoping to find something, anything that would justify this stop. The clean car, the perfect documents, and Ashley's calm cooperation were making him look bad in front of the other officers. "Where are you really from?" Thompson demanded, his voice louder than necessary. Ashley kept her eyes forward, focusing on a point on her car's roof. "I showed you my license, officer. I live on Maple Street, about 15 minutes from here." "Don't get smart with me," Thompson snapped. "I know you don't belong in this neighborhood. What are you really doing here?" One of the backup officers, a younger man named Dave, shifted uncomfortably. He had been on the force for only 2 years, and something about this situation didn't feel right to him. The woman hadn't done anything wrong that he could see, and Thompson's line of questioning seemed unnecessarily aggressive. Ashley took a slow, deep breath. In Afghanistan, she had learned that staying calm under pressure could mean the difference between life and death. She had trained soldiers to maintain their composure when facing hostile situations, and now she needed to follow her own advice. "Officer, I visited my grandmother who lives on Pine Street," Ashley said in a steady voice. "Her name is Rosa Rodriguez, and she's lived there for 30 years. I was bringing her a birthday cake, and now I'm driving home. I haven't broken any laws." Thompson's anger flared at what he perceived as defiance. In his 15 years on the force, he had developed certain expectations about how people should behave during traffic stops. They should be nervous, apologetic, eager to please. This woman's composure struck him as arrogant and disrespectful. "Turn around," Thompson ordered harshly. Ashley slowly turned to face the officers, keeping her hands visible at chest level. For the first time, Thompson got a clear look at her face under the streetlights. She was younger than he had initially thought, probably in her late 20s with dark hair pulled back neatly. But it was her eyes that caught his attention. They were steady and alert, showing no fear despite the intimidating situation. "You military?" asked Officer Martinez, the third officer who had arrived. He had noticed something in Ashley's posture and bearing that reminded him of his own time in the Marines. "Yes, sir," Ashley replied respectfully. "United States Army, I'm a lieutenant." Thompson felt his face grow hot. Military personnel were generally respected in the community, and their presence often complicated situations like this. If word got out that he had hassled a service member without cause, it could mean serious trouble for his career. "Prove it," Thompson said, hoping to catch her in a lie. "My military ID is in my wallet." "In my purse in the car," Ashley explained. "Would you like me to get it?" "No," Thompson said quickly. "Don't move." The fourth officer, a woman named Kelly who had just arrived, watched the interaction with growing concern. She had seen Thompson in action before, and knew he had a tendency to let his emotions get the better of him. The situation was clearly escalating beyond what should have been a simple traffic stop. "Rick," Officer Kelly said quietly, approaching Thompson, "maybe we should just let her go. She's got valid documents, no warrants, and she hasn't done anything wrong." Thompson turned on Kelly with fury in his eyes. "I'm handling this," he hissed. "Don't tell me how to do my job." Ashley could hear the conversation between the officers, and she realized that at least some of them were uncomfortable with what was happening. This gave her a small amount of hope, but she knew the situation was still very dangerous. More neighbors had gathered now, some recording the scene with their cell phones. Ashley could hear murmurs of concern and confusion from the crowd. She was grateful for their presence, knowing that witnesses might be her only protection if things went badly. "Ma'am, are you okay?" called out an elderly white woman from across the street. Thompson whirled around to face the crowd. "Everyone back up. This is police business." But the neighbors didn't move. If anything, more people came out of their houses. Among them was Mrs. Patterson, who lived 2 houses down from Ashley's grandmother. She recognized Ashley immediately. "That's Rosa's granddaughter," Mrs. Patterson called out. "I know her. She visits every month." Thompson felt the situation slipping away from him. The crowd was growing larger and more vocal, and it was becoming clear that this woman wasn't some random suspicious person. She was known in the neighborhood, connected to people who had lived there for decades. Ashley felt a wave of relief at Mrs. Patterson's words, but she knew she wasn't safe yet. Thompson looked increasingly agitated, and she could see him making calculations in his head about how to handle the growing crowd and the uncomfortable questions they were asking. "I want to search your car," Thompson announced suddenly. "Do you have a warrant?" Ashley asked calmly. Thompson's eyes narrowed. "I don't need a warrant if I have probable cause." "What probable cause?" Ashley responded. "I haven't committed any crime. My documents are valid, I have no warrants, and I've been cooperative throughout this entire stop." Officer Martinez stepped forward. He had been thinking about the situation, and his instincts were telling him that Thompson was making a mistake. "Rick, we should probably wrap this up. There's no reason to search the car. Stay out of this," Thompson barked, his control slipping further. Ashley remained perfectly still, but her mind was racing. She had been trained in military law and knew her rights, but she also understood that knowing your rights and having them respected were two different things. The officer was clearly looking for any excuse to escalate the situation further. The crowd of neighbors was getting larger and more vocal. Someone had called the local news station, and Ashley could see a news van pulling up at the end of the street. The situation was becoming a public spectacle, which only made Thompson more desperate and unpredictable. "Everyone needs to disperse immediately," Thompson shouted at the crowd. "This is an active police investigation." But the neighbors refused to leave. Many of them knew Rosa Rodriguez and had met Ashley before. They could see that something was very wrong with this traffic stop, and they weren't going to abandon her. Ashley's grandmother, Rosa, had heard the commotion and came walking down the street as fast as her 80-year-old legs could carry her. When she saw her granddaughter surrounded by police officers, her face filled with alarm. "Ashley, Mia, what's happening?" Rosa called out. Thompson saw the elderly woman approaching and realized his situation was getting worse by the minute. The woman's own grandmother was vouching for her presence in the neighborhood, and the growing crowd of witnesses was making it impossible for him to control the narrative. "Ma'am, you need to stay back," Officer Kelly said gently to Rosa, trying to prevent the situation from becoming even more complicated. "That's my granddaughter," Rosa said firmly. "Why are you bothering her? She's a good girl, she serves our country." Ashley felt tears prick her eyes at her grandmother's words, but she forced herself to remain composed. She knew that any show of emotion could be misinterpreted by Thompson as weakness or guilt. The news reporter had arrived and was setting up her camera equipment. Thompson realized that whatever happened next would likely be broadcast on the evening news. His career, his reputation, everything was now at stake in this confrontation that had started as a routine traffic stop. Officer Dave, the youngest member of the group, approached Thompson one more time. "Rick, we really should let this go. There's no crime here and we're starting to look bad." Thompson's face was red with anger and embarrassment. He had gone too far to back down now, but he couldn't find any legal justification for continuing to detain Ashley. He was trapped by his own poor decisions and his inability to admit he had made a mistake. Ashley sensed the critical moment approaching. Thompson was cornered and desperate, which made him more dangerous than ever. Her military training had taught her to recognize when a situation was about to explode, and every instinct she had was screaming that violence was imminent. She remained perfectly still, her hands visible, her breathing controlled, but inside she was preparing herself for what might come next. In a few seconds her life would change forever, and all her training would be put to the ultimate test. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement as the tension reached its breaking point. Ashley could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, from the 4 police officers to her elderly grandmother, to the growing crowd of neighbors. The news reporter was now recording, her camera capturing every moment of what had become a very public confrontation. Officer Thompson wiped sweat from his forehead despite the cool evening air. He was trapped in a situation of his own making, surrounded by witnesses and cameras with no legal justification for what he was doing. But his pride wouldn't let him back down, and his anger was clouding his judgment more with each passing second. Ashley remained motionless, her hands still visible at chest level. Her military training had taught her to read dangerous situations, and everything about Thompson's body language screamed that he was on the edge of making a terrible mistake. His right hand kept drifting toward his weapon, his breathing was shallow and rapid, and his eyes had taken on a wild look that she had seen before in soldiers who were about to snap under pressure. "I'm going to search that car," Thompson announced loudly, as if saying it with more volume would somehow make it legal. "Officer," Ashley said in her calmest voice. I need to inform you that I'm reaching for my military ID to properly identify myself. It's in my wallet, in my purse, in the car. I'm going to move very slowly. Thompson's hand immediately went to his gun. Don't you dare move! But Ashley was already in motion, moving with the deliberate, controlled movements she had perfected during years of military training. She took one small step toward her car, her hands still visible, her movements predictable and non-threatening. Gun! Gun! Thompson suddenly shouted, though Ashley's hands were clearly empty and visible to everyone present. Officer Martinez looked confused. Where? I don't see any weapon. Ashley froze completely, her heart hammering in her chest. She recognized the panic in Thompson's voice and knew that he was seconds away from making a decision that would change everything. Time seemed to slow down as she watched his hand grip his service weapon. I don't have a gun, Ashley said clearly, her voice carrying across the street so that all the witnesses could hear. I'm a United States Army lieutenant reaching for my military identification. My hands are empty and visible. The crowd of neighbors was murmuring anxiously now. They could all see that Ashley posed no threat whatsoever, but they could also see that Thompson was beyond reason. Several people were recording with their phones, capturing every word and movement. Thompson drew his weapon, pointing it directly at Ashley. The crowd gasped collectively and several people screamed. Ashley's grandmother cried out in terror, but Ashley herself remained perfectly still. Put your hands up. Thompson screamed, his weapon trained on Ashley's chest. Ashley slowly raised her hands above her head, her military training keeping her movements smooth and controlled even as her mind raced. She had faced enemy fire in Afghanistan, but this felt different and more terrifying because it made no sense. She was in her own country, surrounded by her own neighbors, being threatened by someone who was supposed to protect her. Officer Kelly stepped forward, her own hand now on her weapon, but not drawing it. Rick, stand down.
She's not armed.
I saw her reaching for something, Thompson yelled, his voice cracking with stress. She was reaching for her ID, Officer Martinez said. Everyone saw it. She announced what she was doing. But Thompson was past listening to reason. The combination of his own poor decisions, the public humiliation, and years of built-up prejudices had created a perfect storm of bad judgment. His finger moved to the trigger of his service weapon. Ashley saw the movement and knew what was about to happen. In that split second, she made a decision based on her military training. Instead of trying to run or argue, she began speaking in the clear, authoritative voice she had used to command troops in combat situations. Officer Thompson, she said loudly and clearly, I am Lieutenant Ashley Rodriguez, United States Army. I am not armed. I am not resisting. I am complying with all lawful orders. These witnesses can verify that I have done nothing wrong. Her words were calculated to create a clear record for the cameras and witnesses, but they had the opposite effect on Thompson than she intended. Her composure and military bearing only made him more angry and defensive. Shut up, Thompson screamed. Get on the ground. Ashley immediately began to comply, lowering herself slowly toward the pavement with her hands still raised. But as she moved, Thompson's finger tightened on the trigger. The shot rang out across the quiet neighborhood like thunder. Ashley felt the impact before she heard the sound. The bullet struck her in the left shoulder, spinning her around and sending her to the ground. The pain was immediate and intense, but her military training kicked in instantly. Instead of screaming or crying out, Ashley immediately began assessing her injuries while applying pressure to the wound with her right hand. Her years of combat experience had taught her how to function even when wounded, and those skills saved her life in that critical moment. Officer down. Officer down. Someone was shouting, though Ashley realized with grim irony that she wasn't an officer in this context, just a victim. The crowd erupted in chaos. People were screaming, crying, and shouting at the police officers. Ashley's grandmother was sobbing and trying to get to her, but the other officers were holding her back. Thompson stood frozen, his weapon still drawn, staring at what he had done. The reality of the situation was beginning to penetrate his panic, and he was starting to realize the magnitude of his mistake. Ashley forced herself to focus through the pain and shock. She had been shot before, during her second tour in Afghanistan, and she knew that the next few minutes were critical. She needed to control the bleeding, maintain consciousness, and try to bring order to the chaotic scene. I need medical attention, she said loudly and clearly, her voice carrying despite her pain. Someone call an ambulance. Officer Martinez, I need you to apply pressure to this wound while I talk you through it. Officer Martinez looked stunned by the request. Here was a woman who had just been shot by his colleague, and she was trying to give medical instructions to help save her own life. Ma'am, just stay down, Martinez said, moving toward her. Help is coming. No, Ashley said firmly, her military training overriding her civilian politeness. I'm giving you orders now. This is a through-and-through shoulder wound. The bullet missed the major arteries, but I'm losing blood. I need direct pressure on both the entry and exit wounds. Officer Kelly was already on her radio calling for an ambulance and backup, while simultaneously trying to secure the scene. The crowd was growing more hostile by the minute, and she knew that things could get much worse very quickly. Ashley continued to direct her own medical care while maintaining awareness of everything happening around her. She could see Thompson standing there in shock, his weapon now lowered but still in his hand. She could hear her grandmother crying and calling her name. She could see the news camera capturing everything that was happening. Most importantly, she could see the other officers looking confused and ashamed. They knew that what had just happened was wrong, and they were struggling with how to handle the situation. Officer Kelly, Ashley called out, her voice still strong despite her injury. I need you to secure this scene properly. Make sure all witnesses remain available for statements. Preserve all evidence, including Officer Thompson's weapon, and get my grandmother medical attention if she needs it. Kelly looked at Martinez with amazement. Is she seriously giving us instructions on how to handle this? Martinez nodded grimly. She's military. This is probably standard procedure for her. Ashley was fighting to stay conscious as blood loss began to affect her, but her years of training had prepared her for exactly this kind of situation. She had learned to compartmentalize pain and fear, to focus on what needed to be done rather than what had happened to her. The sound of sirens was growing louder as emergency vehicles raced toward the scene. Ashley knew that the next phase of this crisis was about to begin, and she needed to make sure that everything was handled correctly. Too much was at stake for her to lose consciousness now. Her shoulder felt like it was on fire, and she could feel her strength beginning to fade. But she was determined to maintain control of the situation until professional medical help arrived. She had survived combat zones and insurgent attacks, and she would survive this too. What she didn't know was that her calm, professional response to being shot would soon make her famous across the country, and that her military training would not only save her life, but also help bring about important changes in police procedure and training. Blood was spreading across the concrete beneath Ashley as she lay on the sidewalk, but her mind remained sharp and focused. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder, but she knew that every second counted when dealing with a gunshot wound. Her military medical training had taught her that the first few minutes after an injury often determined whether someone lived or died. Officer Martinez, Ashley called out, her voice still strong despite the pain radiating through her shoulder. I need you to listen carefully. Remove your belt and use it as a tourniquet above the wound if the bleeding gets worse. But right now just maintain direct pressure with both hands. Martinez knelt beside her, pressing his hands against her shoulder as instructed. He had basic first aid training from the police academy, but nothing had prepared him for taking medical direction from someone he was supposed to be helping. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on him. Officer Kelly was trying to control the crowd, which had grown to over 30 people. Many of them were angry and shouting at the officers, demanding to know why Ashley had been shot. The news reporter was broadcasting live, describing the chaotic scene to viewers across the city. Everyone needs to stay calm, Kelly called out to the crowd. The ambulance is almost here, but Ashley could see that the situation was spiraling out of control. Thompson was still standing frozen with his weapon drawn. The other officers were struggling to maintain order, and the crowd was becoming increasingly hostile. Her military leadership training told her that someone needed to take charge before things got even worse. Officer Kelly, Ashley said loudly enough for everyone to hear, I need you to secure Officer Thompson's weapon and place him in your patrol car. He's in shock and potentially dangerous to himself and others. Kelly looked surprised by the command, but she could see that Ashley was right. Thompson was clearly not in any condition to be holding a loaded weapon, and his presence was making the crowd more agitated. Rick, give me your gun, Kelly said gently, approaching Thompson with her hand extended. Thompson looked at her with confused eyes, as if he didn't understand what was happening. Slowly, He handed over his service weapon and Kelly guided him toward her patrol car. Ashley continued to monitor the scene while managing her own injury. She could feel herself getting weaker as blood loss took its toll, but she forced herself to stay alert. Too many things could still go wrong, ma'am. The ambulance is here, Officer Martinez said as the emergency vehicle pulled up with its lights flashing. 2 paramedics jumped out and rushed toward Ashley with their equipment bags. She felt a wave of relief seeing the professional medical team, but she wasn't ready to hand over control just yet. I'm Lieutenant Ashley Rodriguez, U.S. Army, she told the lead paramedic. A middle-aged woman named Janet. Gunshot wound to the left shoulder through and through. No major arteries hit. I've been conscious and alert throughout. Blood pressure is probably dropping due to blood loss, but I'm stable for now. Janet looked impressed by Ashley's clear medical assessment of her own condition. Most gunshot victims were either unconscious or hysterical by the time the ambulance arrived. Any other injuries? Janet asked as she began examining the wound. Negative. Just the shoulder. Officer Martinez has been applying pressure as I directed. You'll need to check both entry and exit wounds. The second paramedic, a young man named Carlos, was setting up IV equipment to replace Ashley's lost fluids. As he worked, he couldn't help but notice how calm and professional she remained despite having been shot. Ashley's grandmother, Rosa, had finally managed to push through the crowd and was now kneeling beside her granddaughter with tears streaming down her face. Mia, are you okay? What happened? Why did they shoot you? Rosa asked in rapid-fire Spanish. I'm going to be fine, abuela, Ashley replied in Spanish, then switched to English so the paramedics could understand. The officers made a mistake, but I'm okay. These nice people are going to take care of me. While the paramedics worked, Ashley continued to coordinate the scene around her. She could see that the other officers were still struggling with crowd control and evidence preservation. Officer Kelly, she called out, you need to establish a proper perimeter. Move everyone back at least 20 feet, and make sure someone is taking detailed statements from all witnesses while their memories are fresh. Kelly shook her head in amazement. Here was a woman who had just been shot by a police officer, and she was still trying to help them do their jobs correctly. The news reporter had managed to get close enough to hear some of Ashley's instructions to the officers. She was broadcasting live, describing how the shooting victim was actually directing the police response to her own shooting. This is unprecedented, the reporter said into her microphone. The victim of this police shooting appears to be a military officer, who is now coordinating the emergency response. I've never seen anything like this in 20 years of covering breaking news. Ashley heard the reporter's comments and realized that this incident was going to receive a lot of public attention. That meant it was even more important to make sure everything was handled properly. Janet, she said to the lead paramedic, I need you to document everything carefully. Take photos of the wounds, note the time of injury, and preserve my clothing as evidence. This is going to be a high-profile case, Janet nodded, understanding the implications. Police shootings always involved extensive investigations, and proper medical documentation would be crucial. As the paramedics prepared to transport Ashley to the hospital, she insisted on speaking to each of the officers one more time. Despite having been shot by Thompson, she knew that the other officers were good people who had been caught in a bad situation. Officer Martinez, she said as they loaded her onto the stretcher. You did good work tonight. Your first aid probably saved my life. Don't let this incident make you question whether you're in the right profession. Martinez felt tears in his eyes. He had never met anyone like Ashley, someone who could show such grace and professionalism after being wrongfully shot. Officer Kelly, Ashley continued, make sure Thompson gets the help he needs. He made a terrible mistake tonight, but he's still a human being. And make sure this scene is processed correctly. The investigation needs to be thorough and fair. Kelly nodded, still amazed by Ashley's composure and concern for everyone involved, even the man who had shot her. As they loaded Ashley into the ambulance, the crowd began to disperse, but many people stayed to give statements to the officers who had arrived as backup. The initial chaos was giving way to a more organized investigation, largely because Ashley had used her leadership skills to guide the response. During the ride to the hospital, Ashley continued to monitor her own condition, while also debriefing the paramedics on what had happened. She wanted to make sure they understood that this wasn't a criminal shooting or an accident, but a case of police misconduct that would require careful handling. The officer who shot me panicked, she explained to Janet as they raced through the city streets. He saw something that wasn't there and reacted out of fear rather than training. It's important that everyone understands this wasn't malicious, just bad judgment under pressure. Janet was struck by Ashley's fairness and objectivity. Most people who had been wrongfully shot would be angry and vengeful, but Ashley seemed more concerned with making sure the truth came out than with getting revenge. By the time they reached the hospital, Ashley had already begun thinking about the aftermath of the shooting. She knew there would be investigations, media attention, and probably legal proceedings, but she was determined to use this experience to make positive changes that might prevent similar incidents in the future. Her military training had prepared her for combat, but it had also taught her about leadership, crisis management, and the importance of maintaining professionalism under pressure. Tonight, those skills had not only helped save her life, but had also turned a chaotic and dangerous situation into a more manageable crisis. What Ashley didn't know yet was that the video footage of her calm, professional response to being shot would soon go viral across social media, sparking national conversations about police training, racial bias, and the kind of leadership that was needed to address these problems. Her military training hadn't just helped her survive the shooting, it was about to help her change the world. 3 hours after being shot, Ashley lay in a hospital bed with her left arm in a sling, watching her own shooting on the evening news. The video footage captured by multiple cell phones and the news camera showed the entire incident in stark detail. What amazed her most wasn't the shooting itself, but how calm and professional she had remained throughout the entire ordeal. The doctor, an experienced trauma surgeon named Dr. Williams, had just finished explaining her injuries. The bullet had passed cleanly through her shoulder muscle without hitting any major arteries or bones. She would need physical therapy and would have some permanent scarring, but she would make a full recovery. "You're incredibly lucky," Dr. Williams had said. "A few inches in any direction and this could have been much worse." But as Ashley watched the news coverage, she realized that luck had very little to do with what had happened. Her survival and the positive outcome of the situation had been the result of years of military training that had prepared her to function under extreme pressure. The hospital room door opened, and her grandmother Rosa entered, followed by Ashley's parents who had driven 3 hours after hearing about the shooting. Rosa had been crying on and off for hours, but she managed to smile when she saw her granddaughter sitting up and alert. "Mija, how are you feeling?" her mother asked, rushing to the bedside. "I'm okay, Mom." "Really? It looks worse than it is," Ashley assured her family, though she could see the worry and anger in their eyes. Her father, a retired Army sergeant, studied his daughter with pride and concern. He had taught Ashley to always keep her hands visible during police stops, and he could see from the news footage that his lessons had probably saved her life. "You handled that perfectly," he said quietly. "I'm proud of you." On the television screen, the news reporter was interviewing some of the neighbors who had witnessed the shooting. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who had vouched for Ashley, was speaking passionately about what she had seen. "That young woman did nothing wrong," Mrs. Patterson said into the camera. "She was polite and cooperative the whole time. She was trying to show them her military ID when that officer just lost his mind and shot her. It was terrible to watch." The news coverage was extensive, with multiple angles of the shooting and interviews with various witnesses. But what was capturing the most attention was the footage of Ashley directing her own medical care and helping the other officers manage the scene after being shot. A knock at the hospital room door interrupted the family's conversation. A tall man in a suit entered, followed by a woman carrying a briefcase. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, I'm Detective Harrison from Internal Affairs, and this is District Attorney Patricia Chen. We'd like to speak with you about what happened tonight. If you're feeling up to it." Ashley nodded, though her family looked concerned about her giving a statement so soon after being shot. "I'm ready to talk," Ashley said, "but I want everything recorded and I want my family present." Detective Harrison set up a digital recorder while DA Chen explained the legal situation. Officer Thompson had been arrested and charged with assault with a deadly weapon, civil rights violations, and official misconduct. He was being held without bail pending a full investigation. Ashley spent the next hour giving a detailed account of everything that had happened, from the initial traffic stop to the moment she was shot. Her military training had taught her to observe and remember details, and she was able to provide an incredibly accurate timeline of events. What strikes me most, DHN said when Ashley finished her statement, is how professional you remained throughout the entire incident. Even after being shot, you were directing the emergency response. That's just my training, Ashley replied. In the military, we're taught that leadership doesn't stop when things go wrong. If anything, that's when it's most important. Detective Harrison showed Ashley some of the video footage on his tablet, asking her to comment on specific moments. What he found remarkable was that Ashley's account matched the video evidence perfectly, down to small details that most people wouldn't have noticed or remembered. Officer Thompson claims he thought you were reaching for a weapon, Harrison said, but the video clearly shows your hands were empty and visible at all times. Ashley nodded. He was panicking. I could see it in his body language and hear it in his voice. He was looking for a reason to escalate the situation, and when I reached for my ID, he saw what he expected to see rather than what was actually happening. Over the next few days, the video of Ashley's shooting went viral on social media. People across the country were sharing the footage, not just because it showed police misconduct, but because it showed an incredible example of grace under pressure. Lieutenant Rodriguez began trending on Twitter, with people praising her composure and professionalism. The media attention brought visitors to Ashley's hospital room. Fellow soldiers from her unit came to check on her, along with military officials who wanted to understand what had happened. Local community leaders also visited, wanting to discuss police reform and racial justice issues. One visitor surprised Ashley more than the others. Officer Martinez, the young policeman who had helped apply pressure to her wound, came to the hospital still wearing his uniform. "Lieutenant, I wanted to apologize," he said, standing nervously at the foot of her bed. "What happened to you was wrong, and I should have done more to stop it." Ashley studied the young officer's face and could see genuine remorse and determination there. "Officer Martinez, you did exactly what you should have done. You followed my medical instructions, you helped preserve evidence, and you treated me with respect and dignity. That's all anyone could ask for." Martinez looked surprised. "But I was there when Thompson shot you. I was part of it." "No," Ashley said firmly. "You were part of the solution. Don't let this incident make you question your decision to become a police officer. The community needs good cops like you." A week later, Ashley was released from the hospital and began the long process of physical recovery. But she was already thinking about how to use this experience to create positive change. The shooting had sparked national conversations about police training, racial bias, and crisis management. Several police departments reached out to Ashley, asking if she would be willing to help develop new training programs. They were particularly interested in her crisis management techniques and her ability to de-escalate dangerous situations even while under extreme stress. Ashley agreed to work with law enforcement agencies, but only under certain conditions. She wanted to focus on teaching officers how to recognize and manage their own stress responses, how to accurately assess threats, and how to maintain professionalism under pressure. "Police officers face incredibly difficult situations," she explained to a reporter during one of her first interviews after leaving the hospital. "They need better training in stress management and threat assessment. What happened to me could have been prevented if Officer Thompson had been better prepared to handle his own fear and adrenaline." The legal case against Thompson moved forward quickly. With multiple video angles and dozens of witnesses, the evidence was overwhelming. Thompson eventually pleaded guilty to the charges against him and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He was also permanently banned from working in law enforcement, but Ashley wasn't satisfied with just seeing Thompson punished. She wanted to make sure that similar incidents could be prevented in the future. She began working with police trainers to develop new programs that combined military-style stress inoculation training with community policing principles. The program she helped develop became known as the Rodriguez Protocol, and it was eventually adopted by police departments across the country. The training focused on teaching officers to recognize their own stress responses, to accurately assess threats, and to maintain professional standards even in high-pressure situations. 6 months after the shooting, Ashley was invited to speak at the Police Academy graduation ceremony. Standing at the podium in her military dress uniform, with her left shoulder still showing signs of her injury, she addressed the new officers who would soon be patrolling the streets. "Your job is to serve and protect," she told them. "That means protecting everyone, even when you're scared, even when you're angry, even when you don't understand what's happening. Your training and professionalism are what stand between order and chaos. After her speech, one of the new graduates approached her. He was a young black man who looked nervous but determined. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, I wanted to thank you," he said. "I was thinking about quitting the academy after what happened to you. But then I saw how you handled everything, and I realized that's the kind of officer I want to be." Ashley smiled and shook his hand. "The community needs officers who understand what justice really means. Don't let one bad cop define your entire profession." 2 years after the shooting, Ashley received a call from the mayor's office. The city wanted to honor her with a medal for her courage and her contributions to police reform. The ceremony would be held at City Hall, with the police chief and other officials present. Ashley accepted the honor, but she made it clear that she didn't see herself as a hero. "I just did what my training taught me to do," she said during the ceremony. "Any soldier would have done the same thing."